Hi, I'm Kat and I play Red. Today we're going to be looking at something a bit interesting. It's going to be a 10-minute teach, but it's also going to be part of a campaign to reprint excellent games. So we are going to be looking at Russian Railroads. Our copy of Russian Railroads is 7 years old now. It's very well worn. We're going to be looking at the 2-player side of the board because the 4-player side of the board is showing love. Russian Railroads is by Helmut Oehly and Leonard Orgler, both of whom are huge names in the train game world. They're responsible combined for Trambahn 1844-54, 18CZ, 18 Lilliput, First Class, which is considered to be the card game version of Russian Railroads. Loads of stuff. They've done loads of train games. They obviously like their trains. This is probably our favourite mid-weight Euro. We also play it a lot on Board Game Arena, especially 2-player when we just can't be bothered to set the game up in an evening, so we'll play it 2-player online. It's a brilliant game. You should try and find it. If you do, buy it. You'll love it. So, let's have a look at how it plays in our 10-minute teach. Russian Railroads is a worker placement game. Depending on the number of players will depend how many workers you have. In a 2-player game, you'll start with 6. There are a couple of opportunities to get extra workers, but we'll look at them when the time comes. Let's start by looking at the main board and the available worker placement spots. So, as I said before, this is the 2-player version. So, these are the spots that aren't available on this side of the board. So, here you'd put 2 workers as shown, and you'd move your black tracks up by 3. Moving your tracks up gives you points, but we'll look at that when we look at the player board. 2 workers here moves your grey up 3. 1 worker here moves your brown up 1, brown up 2 for 2 workers, etc. with the 5 different colour available tracks here. In your game, as well as workers, you'll have rubles, these special coins. Rubles can always be used in place of a worker. So, here, instead of putting my worker on, I could choose to place a coin. This spot is slightly special. Here, you'd need to place 1 worker and 1 rupee to move up 2 tracks of your choice, which is what this symbol means. We'll see this at other points in the game. This final spot on the right hand side here is the only spot multiple workers can go on. So I can place my worker, Rob can place his, Rob can place another, and so on. That's indicated by the faded workers here. So in the centre of the board we have turn order. You can always choose to place a worker on this spot to change the turn order. Moving across, here you can place 1 worker and you can take one of these tiles that will either become a locomotive or a factory on your player board. And the spot beneath it, you place 3 workers and you take 2. 1 to become a locomotive and 1 to become a factory. These spots you place workers and you can move your industry track. This spot here is a score multiplier. These little chips here will go on the top of your board and double the score for those spaces. This space will give you 2 coins. As I said before, coins can always be used in place of workers, so they're good. The engineers here indicate the length of game. In a 2-player game, the game is played over 6 rounds, so there are 6 engineers available over the course of the game. The first engineer here can be bought by a player. They place one coin, they take the engineer, flip it over so it becomes a worker placement spot, put it next to their board, and it's a spot they can use for the rest of the game. The second engineer is always available to use as a worker placement spot. So in this case, you'd be able to move your grey track up by 1, and that would give you 5 points. The other engineers here will move along as the game progresses, so they'll have one round where they're an available worker placement spot, and then another round where they're available to buy. You can see here, anything in stars is points. At the end of the game, the player with the most engineers will score 40 points, and the second place player will score 20 points. So that is just a little reminder of the in-game scoring. So, now we've had a look at the main board, let's have a look at the player board. At the start of the game, this is what your board will look like. You'll start with a black track on each of the 3 available lines. The Trans-Siberian, I'm reading upside down, Moscow to St. Petersburg and Moscow to Kiev tracks. And again, you'll notice lots of places with stars which will indicate points. If you get to the end of any of these tracks, you'll score 10 points. So, what are you trying to do in this game, other than score points? As I said, you'll move your tracks along the board here. Now, some spots will only activate if they're powered, which is where the engines come into play. As you can see, we start with a level 1 locomotive on this top track. So, this track is scored to number 1 spot. So, I will gain points for anything on number 1. Here is a guideline of what the tracks are worth, and shows you all the colours of tracks available. So, the blacks are the one you start with. When your black moves to here, you'll gain the grey tracks. They become available and just go by the side of the board for now. However, if I then decide to move grey tracks, I can move these onto the board. So if I had free grey movement, I could pop all 3 onto the board. Alternatively, I could move 1 grey 2 spaces, 1 grey 1, 1 3. You can divide it among whatever tracks you like. So, as you move up, different spots will have different benefits. So, here, if you have your brown track and it's powered by a locomotive, which is what the little train symbol here means, you'll get an extra worker. When my black reaches here, my brown tracks will become available to me. The basis of this game is quite simple. The one thing that can be a little bit tricky is getting to grips with the scoring, as shown up here. So let's just have a look at something here. So, say I had a level 3 locomotive here. At the end of the round, once everyone has placed all their workers, scores are calculated. My brown here is worth 2 points for each square it's on. So I'd get 2 points, 4 points, and I'd get 1 point for the grey here. Even though the grey is further on, it's only powered up to 3, so I'd only score for those first 3 spaces. And of course, this is where the multipliers go, so don't forget them. That would mean this would score me 4 points for this square. As your black track moves along, you'll be able to claim the tan tracks. These will score you 4 for every space they're on. Quickly ignoring that for now, we'll go to the bottom here. This allows you to put your white track on and move it immediately by 2 spaces, scoring you 7 points for each space. Your tracks must always stay in this order. You can never have the white ahead of these. The white always has to be at the back. The brown must always be behind the grey, and so on, as shown nice and clearly at the top of the player board here. Some of the other interesting spaces are these circles here. Now if you notice, like I said before, there's a little locomotive symbol, which means you must be powered up to 13 to get this bonus. Now, as I said, the Trans-Siberian is the bread and butter of the game. If you notice up the top here, there's a little plus symbol, which means this is the only track you can have 2 engines on, meaning it's not too tough to have 13 power on this top track. When you hit one of these spaces here, again black and powered on these spots, and there's also one on the industry track which we'll come on to, you get to pick one of these little tiles. These little tiles give you a variety of bonuses. So, like I said before, this symbol here is moving any track. So, I could place that here, and I'd get to move 1, 2, 3, 4, or any combination. We'll come back to this one. We'll come back to those ones. This chip here allows you to take 4 multipliers. So in this case, with my white on the board, that would make all of these spaces worth 14 points, which is not insignificant. This track allows you to move your industry marker 5 spaces. Now in this case there's no factory, so I couldn't move it onto there, but over the course of the game you'll get factories, you'll be able to move it 5. This little chip here allows you to place a second industry marker, which would then mean at the end of the round you score twice for your industry. So now let's look at some of the slightly more complex ones. This little chip allows you to place a new scoring marker here, meaning your browns, your tans and your whites are all worth extra points. This chip means that you get to place this little bonus on your board. Now this means if your grey is there and powered, little locomotive symbol, you'll score 20 points for it at the end of each round. Lastly, and by no means least, is this little chip. This allows you to take one card of your choice from each of these piles. Now, the question mark cards offer you a bonus that you'll be able to use during the game, or immediately. So, this one would give you a multiplier, an industry movement, a black movement, and then one of each. 9 locomotive, factory and some industry movement, an engineer and a coin, and this special little black worker. So you can use him and he'll give you an extra movement on all black tracks. The other cards are an end game bonus, so depending on what strategy you're going for will depend which of these you want to take. So this one at the end of the game will score you the total of your locomotives. This one will give you 7 points for each of these little round chips you've collected. Straight up 15 points, doesn't get much easier than that. This one gives you a bonus engineer in case of a tie. 4 points per factory. Extra points for the extra workers. An extra 10 points for each end of the line, and extra points for your multipliers. So, depending on your strategy, will depend which of these cards you'll want to take. Generally, you only ever get a shot at one each of these, so choose wisely. So, now we've had a look at the tracks and what they do, let's have a look at the industry. So, only had the one. As your industry moves up, you'll see the scores and you'll get the number of points at the end of the round as indicated by the stars. However, over the course of the game, you'll place factories here, and as soon as your industry marker moves onto here, you'll get the shown bonus. So in this case, it would be 1 coin. I then move along the track. Now, if you notice, these are the same shape as the locomotives, because they are the locomotives. When I'm placing locomotives on my board, I can choose to swap them out. So if I were to take this 3, I could swap it out with the 1. This one then becomes an available factory to take. So in that case, I'd pop that there. And as I move on, I'd score the total of my engineer cards. The engineers have got a little number here which shows you what you'd score. So in this case, I'd score 5 points. Obviously, as you go up, you get higher points on the industry track. There's also one of these little round discs up for grab as you move along. But you can't move if you don't have a factory there. So getting those factories in is quite important. While the Trans-Siberian line at the top is your bread and butter, it's what gets you your extra colour tracks, the other tracks have other advantages. So as you move up the St. Petersburg line, there are 2 of these round discs up for grab, but only if your black track is here and is powered. Also, if you get high enough all the way up to the end, this grey up here, powered, means that you're going to score double the points for that track at the end of the round. Then you have the Moscow to Kiev track. This is one of my favourites and can rack the points up quite nicely. So, if you notice, all of these initial spots have got black, powered and points. So, let's take that off, pop that there. Here, if I'm here, I'm going to get +1 point at the end of the round. However, if I'm here, I'm actually going to get +2 and +1. So I'd get a total of 3 points. Here would be 6. Here would be 10. So you can see these points rack up quite nicely and quite easily. Also, on this bottom track here is a space to get another worker. So it shows the black track, but there's no locomotive, so you don't actually have to be powered to get that bonus. However, the last space here, if you're powered this high, you're going to get an extra 10 points at the end of each round, along with all the other ones from back at the beginning. Once everyone has finished playing and all their workers are on the board or on their engineers, you're going to check turn order. Here, green has decided they want to go first next time. So they're actually going to get the opportunity to place this worker again. So let's say they go there, they do that action, and turn order will change. Now, for turn order, you'll see the 2 in a star here. There are these little cards showing the current turn order. When you've finished, you'll turn them over and receive the points shown on the back. So the player who went first will get 0 points. The player who went second will get 2 points. Then you're going to score your boards, take your workers off the main board, which I'm terrible at remembering to do, and the engineers will shunt up. So this engineer will move there and become available to buy. This next engineer will go there and become an available worker placement spot, and these will shift up, giving you an idea of how many rounds are left in the game. While the concepts of this game are pretty simple and we're all used to a worker placement game, the one thing that can be a bit tricky is the scoring. So let's have a look at this board that I've made a bit of a mess of and see how this would score me at the end of a round. So my top track is actually powered to 13, so I would score points up to the 13 on here. So let's start at the beginning and work round. My white track here gives me 7 points for each square, but I've got the multipliers, so that would actually be 14 for each of these 3 squares, which would be a total of 42. So these 3 squares would score me 42 points, and I'd move up the track. This tan is worth 4 points, but it's doubled, so that would be another 8 points. The brown is worth 2. The grey is only worth 1 per square, so it would be 1 for this square and 1 for the square it's on. So that would be an additional 2 points, giving me a score of 54 for this Trans-Siberian track. The St. Petersburg line is only powered up to 2. My grey, however, is past that, so I'd get 1 point for each space, so I'd get 2 points for that track. Here, I'm going to score these first 3. Now, the black on its own doesn't score anything, however, it scores the points shown here. So it'd be 1 plus 2 plus 3, so a total of 6 points. Then we move down and score the industry track. I'm on 15 here, so that would score me 15, so 77. So that would give me a total of 77 points for this round. The one thing that can put people off or get people really excited with this game is your first couple of rounds. You're going to be scoring maybe a dozen points if you're lucky, but it really ramps up as the game goes on and these bigger scoring tracks come out, or you start to score these. So it's quite feasible to score a couple of 100 points in one of your end rounds. However, the first rounds, it will be slim pickings. Be prepared for that. At the end of the game, you'll score the tracks as I just showed you, and then endgame points will be for whoever has the most engineers. As I said earlier, 40 points up for grab for the player with the most, 20 points for the player with the second. You'll also score these endgame cards. So let's use this as an example. I have 4 multipliers. That would get me an extra 20 points. Good. So this is the base game of Russian Railroads. There's also 2 expansions available, German Railroads and American Railroads. As far as I'm aware, American Railroads is fairly readily available. Sadly, German Railroads isn't. They both add a different player board, so there's some different mechanics going on. In German Railroads you have coal and you have to blow spots up on the board to transverse through them, and you can pick different tracks. American Railroads has got a stock market element, so although they are very much based on this, they add loads more stuff if you can find them. As I said, the game is on Board Game Arena. It's a really good implementation. If you get a chance to play it, do. I play red on there, so if you fancy giving me a game, add me, say hello, and we can play Russian Railroads. Don't have to have the game, that's the bonus. I would love to see this reprinted. This, to me, is the golden era of Z-Man games. This is around the time they released Bruges and Aura and Labora and Glass Road. They had so much good stuff available then, but sadly a lot of it seems to have been lost in the ether. So join me in a campaign to get Russian Railroads back on the train map. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff. Come and say hello to me on Instagram, Twitter and Board Game Arena, and hopefully we'll get a game in. See ya, bye.